Getting started on the landing gear brackets. So the brackets go between station B and C. There's a lot of little pieces that have to be cut out that all get welded on there to form the brackets that will hold the landing gear. So I'll start cutting those pieces out first. So I've made copies off the drawing of some of these various parts, and all these are 100,000s that I'm working on right now, which is these pieces here. And this is for station C, which also incorporates holding the spar, the bottom end of the spar. So I've got them blanked out. I'll transfer these curves to them and locate the holes and get them all drilled. I've already made some of these smaller pieces that go on the end of the bracket there where the bolt will go through for the landing gear. So I drilled these holes first so I can locate the pattern on the hole. Now, I'm not going to be able to cut that out, and I don't have a 3/8 hole punch, but I do have a 3/8 bolt and nut. And it's not very hard to use them to punch a hole. So now I've got my 3/8 hole that I can line up on there. Good enough anyhow. So I've ice gripped the two together and trimmed them as one. So now I'm just going to use this template here as a guide to get it to look something like this. Alright, so I started making these doublers, and so this end down here, I've created that profile, and I'm not going to do this end right now. What I'm going to do is take these all apart. I did 4 at a time, and then I'm going to bolt it on here, and then tack weld it in place, and then I'll profile it to fit this part. That way it'll come out nice. So I'll do these two right here. The other two go to a different bracket. Alright, so after tack welding those doublers on, I took it to the grinder and made it match. And if you put it on the print, it even looks something like the print. So with that, I'm going to finish weld these and go on and make the rest of the brackets. So I'm making pretty good progress producing all these brackets. I've done all the ones where there's call-outs in full-scale drawings here, but there's actually 4 more for the front and 4 more for the rear that are over here in the cluster, the actual drawing of the assembly. And I had to stare at the print for a while to figure out, okay, what's what and what goes where. But basically they're right here where those 100,000ths thicknesses are called out. You can see it right there and right there. So I'm going to whip those out. Alright, I'm going to bend this outside bracket on station C. And so I'm just going to put it on the print here and get the transfer over this bend line. And then I will take it over to the bender can bend it. See if I got it close. Alright, so I'm going to bend it on this Harbor Freight 30-inch bender. It's a little over its capacity, but if I keep it in the middle, I should be fine, because I did have some problems with this thing where I overloaded it, and the hinge kind of messed up. I repaired all that, and so I want to keep it in the middle so both hinges take the load. It's not very wide, it should be okay. So the first thing I want to do is see what the bed is. So I'm lucky the bed is actually 0, so I can put this magnetic angle finder on it, and I just need to go to 25, which is what the print says. I'm going to start putting these fittings on. I'm going to start with station C. So there's B, this is C. And the fitting that I'm going to work with first is this strut fitting. So this holds on to the wing strut. Goes right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a file to some of these welds that are here. I'm not going to try to get rid of all of them, but high spots and things that are sticking out, because we're going to be trying to put a flat plate on a round tube that's been welded. Alright, so I've got that guy clamped in place. The tail's pretty much centered on the tube down here. It's close enough for what I'm going to do now. Is this one goes on the back side, and it gets bent on the bend line for the print, and its tail goes up this tube right here. So I'm going to start bending this. It should be around 33 degrees that it's correct, until this will lay flat on the back of this one and sit on the tube right there. Alright, so I got a 90-degree bend off the bender, so now I'm going to go to the vise. Alright, this is what I'm doing to get the rest of the bend. So one thing about this bracket, there's already this washer on here, and we're bending up into this corner. So my solution to that is I took a piece of steel. This is actually a washer for a foundation bolt, and I bend it just a little bit that way, so that I can set it on here, clamp it in the vise, and it's in the corner. So then I'm going to take and just clamp this here. And I'm going to bend it over. That's probably going to get me close. I'm just going to check here and see what I got. Looks like I'm at about 45, so I need to go a little bit more. So I got a fit now that is pretty good. So I'm going to bolt these two pieces together. And one thing I did before that was clean up the inside to make sure that this weld from around the outside there, where I welded the washers on, isn't interfering with these two sitting flat. Okay, so now I got them bolted together. I can take and line this guy up on this tube here for station C, and this reinforcing bar cross brace that goes up here. This bracket here has an offset, so there's a right and a left to this bracket, and clamp it up and get it as even as it can between the two sides. And that's pretty good for right now. I'm now going to move on to station B and put its bracket in place here. Alright, now what I'm going to do is take a 3/8 rod, round stock, and put these side pieces on. Now, they're not the same, C and B from the drawing. So I'm putting station B on here, and I'll slide it down this end. They're also not the same top and bottom, so I've labeled them what side goes down on the bottom, so I actually put them on here correctly. Alright, and now what we're going to do is just splay these out. Like so. Alright, now I'm going to take and put a hose clamp around this bar, and that'll hold it all in place while we wiggle it a million times to get it to the right position. Definitely don't want it real tight. All that's going to do hold it in place. It'll hold these brackets down in the radius down there on the bottom. Alright, now with that bar in there and somewhat parallel to the lower longeron here, I'm going to clamp the side of this bracket. And what this is going to do is, one, it's going to straighten this bracket up so that this is perpendicular to what will be the pivot point for the landing gear. Alright, so here's what's going on. I clamped these brackets on the side, and they're pulled all the way as far as they'll go towards the lower longeron with the clamp here on this tube right here. It's just barely on there. I don't want to deflect it, I just want it to hold it in place. So that squares up this bracket here, and then I can correctly orient it on this lower tube here and up here on this other tube, which is right there. So that's the tube that goes up and supports the lower part of the door frame. So I'm going to tack it there, and that'll get that guy in place. I'll do the same thing on station B. Then I can take most of these clamps off and work on these side guys here. Now, right now, I have this rod and the lower longeron pretty parallel, but it's not perfect. But it's good enough that these are in the right orientation now, as far as they're not twisted this way or that way. And I'll be able to assemble the whole thing and have no bind in this and have these in line. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and do those tacks, and then take off a bunch of these clamps and work on this rod, getting it all straight. So I've got this where I like it now. The rod is free to move. The rod is parallel to the lower longeron, and we're all clamped in place. These brackets here are pushed all the way back against the tube into that radius that's on the back of them. And just the fact that this will move this freely, they're perpendicular to this bracket, or fairly damn close. Certainly good enough for a pivot point for the landing gear. So I'm going to tack weld these side plates in position. Alright, with these side plates tacked in place, I'm going to put the rod back in here, and it moves freely, which is perfect. And I'm going to start working on these side supports. So they go on here and they get bent until their little arms come back along the tube. Now, I made all these ahead of time off the print, And one thing I would say is if you're going to do that, make sure the hole center between this hole and this hole, which is 3/4 to fit the tube, is exactly the same as the hole center you use on this bracket. I scaled it off the print for some dumb reason and came up with 2 different numbers and made them that way, which means there's no way you're ever going to get them perfectly. Let's see, there's a little gap between the tube and there, which didn't have to be there, and I would have rather have it a little tighter. So when you make this part and this part, make sure you do the hole centers the same. It seems obvious, but at the time I didn't catch it because I did the work actually a few months apart. But anyhow, and the number on the print, when I scaled it, it came out to like, well, I didn't use a scale, I used a micrometer. It came out to like 9.13 something, no, higher than that, 9.3 something. It didn't look like it rounded out to any normal number, so I don't know if it's just a little drawing error, probably. Anyhow, it was close enough to an inch. I made things an inch, 1 inch between the two. Shouldn't affect anything. I mean, it's just the landing gear position. We're not trying to get within angstroms. So I'm going to go bend this, and the angle you bend it at will determine where the little arms end up on the tube. And you can correct it afterwards, but it's a lot nicer if it comes out pretty close when you do it. I will bend this and show you what I mean. Start out with a nice 90 here. Alright, so here's the one we just bent, and it doesn't fit. And the reason it's not fitting is these ears here are interfering with this 3/4 radius. So I'll show you how I fix that. Alright, so I'll just put it in the vise like that. I have a 3/4 inch bolt. You could use a 3/4 inch rod, whatever you can come up with. Just give it a tap till it makes it down into the bottom of that radius. All they did was push those little ears back. Back on the fuselage, I can now get this on here. Alright, so now if I put this tight, and I can just clamp it with vice grips or something if I need to, I can look down over here, and you should be able to see there. So look down over here, you can see that this ear here needs to go in a little, as does this one here. And I'll tweak those until it lays flat on there, and then I'll go on and do all the rest the same way. Okay, so I've gone back and forth a few times, but now I've got this kind of the way I like it. We're flat up against this bracket, we're down on the tubes with the arms, gaps are nice and tight. So that one's good. I'll go on and work the next two. The front one is a little different, so I'll show you what's going on there when I get to it. So one other thing on these, I've got the fit I like. The radius on this here and this one are a little different. I don't know if you can see there's a little lip there. So I'm just going to run a marker down here. And then I'll take this guy over to the belt sander and get rid of some of that material so they line up better. It'll just make the weld come out a little nicer. So this is why I said earlier that I would probably make these at the time. So the other three fit pretty well. So this is the one for the front, and so you make 6 of the one little gull wing brackets. You make 2 of these for station B on each side, 1 on each side. So this tube starts going up at this point, right? So the nose is up, I can't remember, a couple inches from station B. So that means that tube is moving away from where you're putting the bracket on. And the print tries to compensate for it, but as you can see, this is nowhere near touching that tube. And back here on this bracket, it doesn't matter so much because he's going to get welded to that plate. and then the whole thing will get welded to the tube. And I can fill this here too, because it's not the critical part of this weld. I mean, really the support comes from these ears being connected to the tube and everything. But I would have made that distance quite a bit larger and got a better fit on that for sure. And I probably will remake this guy. All right, so there's all those little side braces on there. And I'm going to take now and clamp them in position and tack weld them and get them all tacked in position. Alright, so right here where the strut attaches, these two aren't perfect, and you know, they've been welded and they have that washer put on them. So I'm going to take a grinder to them and just clean them up a little bit so it's a nice radius and it'll be easier to weld and look a lot better. So in order to get that fuselage up higher so that I could get in there and just comfortably weld inside, because you're kind of leaning over the door frame is how I'm getting in there. I took another board here and drilled a hole in it and clamped it on the front of my rotisserie. I brought it up a good 18 inches, and that puts me in a much better welding position. So I've come to the point where I need to get in and weld this right behind where this rod is. The rest of this is welded up. So I'll just pull this rod out of here. That's not the way it comes out. After welding all that, you got to cut it out. Now each one of these is free of the other ones. You can tap it out. I got a nice long punch, and they come out fairly easy. All right, so with the bar out of there, I can finish these welds that go underneath here, this side and this side here. Other than that, this is all welded, so I'll go around and just fix any of the issues I have. Like right here, this weld didn't come all the way up to the other weld, so I'll finish that. And this one here, I didn't get all the way around the end. Anyhow, clean all that stuff up, clean it up, and that'll be the end of these B and C attachment locations. I finished welding the, what side is this? This is the right side. And so this is kind of what it looks like from the bottom. There's a lot to be welded there. It's really difficult to get into some of the areas. And you've got a tube laying on a plate, and you're filling the gaps. So they're large fills. But it's all doable. I will, here's the front one. That was the rear one there with the wing strut on it. So I will turn this thing over and show you the other side what it looks like. But those two are done. Here's the fittings from the, well, more or less the side. Moving on, I'm starting on the center mount for the struts. And I've made the two plates that are shown in the plans. I've mated them together now, and I'm going to drill the holes for the where the rod ends go. So continuing on these center plates for the strut, I put these thickener washers on here and tacked them in place. I haven't finished welding them yet because I want to bend it first. And so they both get bent. But I want to bend the inside one first, which is this one that goes around the tube. And it gets bent, so its washers go towards the inside. So it gets bent on this side here, somewhere near where those marks are. But there's a few things to maintain on this, and one of them is we want to maintain this 11/16 to the tube from the center line of the 3/8 hole. And so what I did is made a couple spacers. And so 11/16 times 2, which will be the diameter of what these needed to be, it comes out to be 1.375. So I made these at 1/400 to give me a little extra clearance. I'm going to bolt those on here. And then what I'll be able to do is hold this up on the tube tight and figure out where I'm going to bend it. Because that bend isn't actually showing on the center, and it really doesn't probably matter that much anyhow. What's important is we keep this the correct distance from the tube, and even would be nice. And so these spacers are also the right thickness for here. So I have the rod end right here, and if I measure it, it's 5.615. So I made these 5.7 thick. That'll give some clearance to get them in there. When you bolt this together, it's going to collapse down on here anyhow, but we don't want to have to beat it in there or anything. So they're a little bit wider than the rod end, and the diameter will hold it the correct distance off the tube so that I can figure out where I'm going to bend it. And then once I bend it, I can fit this other one to it. Once I bend it, I'll finish these welds on these washers on both of these, and then probably tack him in place, because it's not immediately obvious, but this tube up here is like 1 inch in diameter, and this down here is tighter than that. So this outer one, actually, they're showing it wrap around the tube a little bit. So to do that, if this one's in place at the right angle, I can then just work on bending this guy so he fits around the tube properly and comes together at the right distance. Anyhow, I'll get going on that. All right, so here's my front bracket. I've bent it, and I put the spacers on that I made. Now it turns out the spacers aren't really necessary because I can't get that close to the tube where I wouldn't have that 7/16 clearance. But they are useful that I can use them to get it lined up on this tube better, because I can just equalize these gaps. And I did file a little bit of an angle on this side, but there's almost nothing left here. So it doesn't make sense that you would try to get this in tighter. So I'm going to clamp it in place here, get it all lined up, and then I will tack it. All right, so the front plate's tacked in place. And so now with the spacers there, I put the bolts in here part way, but you can see that this plate hits this tube and doesn't lay down nicely here. So what I'm going to do is draw a nice line down here and go start bending this bracket until I get it to lay flat, and we've got the proper spacing down here. All right, so I've done the first bend, just kind of get it started. And what becomes immediately apparent is, in order to get this parallel to the other side, this thing's going to need another bend in the other direction. So I put a line here. So we're going to basically put a Z in it so we can come out, because there's our thickness, and go around the tube and then come up onto here. So I'm going to go do this bend in the opposite direction on the bender. All right, with that second bend, I've got this coming in and going out. These two they're close enough to parallel. And so now I just need to work on this ear. I need to bring it down so that it lays on the tube. So I'll just start bending back out here a little more. So there it is, all tacked in place. So I will come in and weld it all now. And after that, I can remove these spacers, and that'll be it for the landing gear attachment fittings. So that's it for the fittings that hold the landing gear on. And one learn out of there is make your rotisserie so it can go up nice and high. It makes your life a lot easier.